Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 14. I hope everyone had a wonderful, transcendent, emotionally freeing, and psychologically liberating Pesach, which, as I discussed in the previous episode, is the epitome of helping us all heal and grow through our inhibitions, our fears, our insecurities, and all the things that block us emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, in every possible way. Basically, to transcend and to free ourselves from Mitzarim v'Gvulim, Mitzrayim, the limitations and the inhibitions and the constraints and constrictions that in some way trap us. With that said, thank you again for all your comments, for all your letters, both encouraging, challenging, provocative. So keep them coming. Send them to meaningfullife.com/MyLifeLive. And where you can also see all the archived episodes. So this episode 14, I want to continue a subject that began in the previous episode about honoring parents who don't seem to deserve honor. Dealing with abuse, tragically, it's a reality more often than we like to believe, where parents hurt and can abuse their children. Children are defenseless. Children are vulnerable. And God entrusted these children to parents. And sadly, at times parents can hurt their children, sometimes in very severe ways. I discussed at length the issue and how we should look at the sanctity and the dignity of our children as literally a trust, a sacred trust that was given to us. Our children do not belong to us. They are God's children. Someone sent me a comment on that, actually a story that confirms it, a beautiful story, with an individual who wrote to the Rebbe that he has difficulties controlling his anger at times and yells at his children, and at times also strikes them. He felt really bad about it. And as such, he decided to write to the Rebbe, what can he do about it? He went then into Yechidus, into a private audience with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe then addressed this question and said to him, regarding what you wrote to me about striking, hitting your children, one of the ways, one of the ideas of how to approach it is to contemplate and recognize that these children are not just your children, they're God's children. And would it be conceivable for you to go hit another person's child, another parent's child? How much more so it should be absolutely and unequivocally unacceptable for you to hit God's child. The Rebbe said the following words: your hand should shake before you touch God's child. And in case it's a matter of education, where at times, because of discipline, we may need to in some way discipline our children. Never, however, out of anger. In other words, it should be deliberate, be thought through, and never out of anger. So there you have a very direct story, which is a powerful one, how we reckon, how we see our children not as our own, they're given to us, entrusted to us. And how critical it is to understand the great responsibility of both shaping them into confident, secure, and healthy adults, and similarly to avoiding doing anything that may hurt or in some way damage or in some way even in permanent ways or deep ways, some way abuse that child, which will impact him or her for many years. I actually received today, once we announced the episode, a letter from one of the writers, one of our listeners, who says, first of all, thank you for addressing such important subjects. In regards to my question, I always understood that when and if hitting a child becomes necessary, the rule is not with your father's strength, not with internal anger, rather making believe you are angry and actually being pained by having to do that. And you must make up with a stronger measure of chesed and love in order to show your child that you really love him, and what you did was only because you love him and for his personal well-being. In line with the principle, the smell dechid could be yemine techavkeni. There's an expression, smell dechi, mean mekareves. Sometimes it says, smell tachas l'reishi, meaning techavkeni. meaning using the weaker left hand to discipline and the stronger right hand to embrace. What happens, this writer continues, that when a father felt the need to apply a higher measure of discipline and an occasion having to hit his child because he was more rebellious, chutzpahnik, or defiant in relation to the rest of his siblings, and as a result today, when he's almost 19 years old, the child that is, there's a strong measure of resentment and rejection towards his father, despite the efforts of compensating with presents more than the rest of his siblings and even apologies. The father admits not having been successful in holding his inner anger when applying discipline, making it obvious to the child. He feels a lot of regret. He has admitted to his son that he wishes he wasn't so severe. What seems to make the case worse is the fact that to the son, the spankings seem to be far more numerous than what the father believes really was. Despite the fact that seemingly there was a need to discipline the son, nonetheless, today there's a huge wall of pain separating father and son. How can this be effectively repaired? Thank you, a concerned father. Well, this just confirms the story I just told with the Rebbe, who told us to a shliach, an educator, a rabbi, of how we have to be careful of touching a child. And yes, by doing that, you can end up causing more damage than you think you may even imagine. After the fact, well, this is something we're going to be discussing. I'm going to discuss it both from the perspective of the child to the parent. As I said, how do you honor parents who don't seem to deserve honor? Parents who have been seriously abusive, seriously delinquent, and don't even have regrets, or minimize or in denial. So after the fact, it's far more complicated. So I'd rather not address it right now. I'd rather first address before the fact, preventing it. There's a famous story with the Rebbe Rashab and the Frierdiker Rebbe. The only time the Rebbe Rashab wanted to touch the Frierdiker Rebbe with a slight touch to his face, and afterwards the Frierdiker Rebbe saw the Rebbe Rashab standing in a corner crying. So all this teaches us, never out of your emotional anger. Very often we react to our children based on our feelings. You're embarrassed, you're angry, you're overwhelmed. That is never a reason to hurt another person in general, and especially a child. What does your feelings have to do with it? You were given a sacred trust, as I mentioned, and how can you allow your feelings to get involved here? If a person feels, after thinking about it, not out of anger, not out of a moment of emotion or impulse, that this child needs discipline, premeditated, then you have to think about it and do it in a way that's very well planned. And even then, hitting may not be the way to go, and I would suggest probably not the way, especially in our day and age, when you don't have many people who are Yirei Shamayim, God-fearing people who you can just trust that a touch is coming because of a godly place and not because of it has some tinge of your own intentions. Regardless how you interpret the story of the Rebbe stands, these are God's children, and your hand has to shake, meaning don't even touch a particular child. Find other ways to discipline. People will say, what about the verse in Proverbs that says someone that spares the rod is not doing a chesed, a kindness, is actually hurting the child? So number one, the word rod can mean many things. Number two, you're talking about holy times where a person was completely saturated with the divine. He was the most refined, able, sensitive person. And for him, touching a rod would be the worst possible thing. Another story. In our day and age, you don't have a situation like that, and that is why you hear from the Rebbe many times that he mentioned. I remember it vividly, saying, it's enough to show the rod hanging on the wall. You don't have to use it. And there are many ways to discipline. As I said, the damage done by hurting the child, especially if it has some tinge of personal interest of the parent, is far outweighs the discipline that you may want to achieve. As we've seen here in this letter and many, many instances. And generally better to err on the side of caution, of being careful when it comes to a life. You never know what kind of impact you have, especially on a sensitive person. Long term. All with good intentions and all with excuses and so on and so forth. That's the obligation of a parent to children. And the obligation, as I said, is a sacred one, a divine one, that God should entrust his child to you as a parent. Think about it. It's awesome. Never take for granted your children, even though they're in your home and you see them every day and they're entrusted to you and you can feel that you can do whatever you want with them. They're not yours. It's a microcosm. It's a gift. Some people, God has not blessed with children, God forbid. So it's a gift, every child. Now let's address the issue of how we look at it from the child's perspective. The child grows up. And I've had this question a number of times. I've read some of these questions last time. I don't want to read them again. So see this as a part 2 to the previous episode, 13. We discussed how to do an honor an abusive parent, abusive in the sense of a temper, anger, words, physical, consistent, and so on. And I read at least 4 or 5 different questions in that regard. The bottom line, let's take the worst case scenario. Not the worst, but a bad case scenario, where there was real abuse by an unhealthy parent on a consistent manner that has caused serious damage to the child. No one is damaged irreversibly, but there's a difficult work to overcome physical or other types of abuse, emotional, sexual, and so on. So what is the obligation of the child to a parent? Very important question. We say in the 10 Commandments, commandment is, the 5th commandment. You shall honor your parents, your father and mother, in order to live long. There's no conditions. It doesn't say honor your parent only if they're good parents, only if they're healthy parents, only if they're functional, only if they loved you. It says unconditional. Honor your parents, honor your father and mother. How do we understand this in the context of parents that don't seem to deserve honor? Very important question. So let's address it by asking a few questions on this commandment. Number one, the expression is kabed, to honor. It doesn't say oyev, like v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your parents. It says honor them. The next thing is, as opposed to many other commandments, it gives us the reason. It gives us the reward, cause and effect. The man yaricha yemecha. You should live long. Why? Why is that important to add here? And most importantly, perhaps, is think about the 10 Commandments, as we know, or Seres Hadibris. Actually, commandments may not even be an accurate translation. I believe this is addressed by the Rebbe at one point, because it says Seres Hadibris. Dibris are words, are utterances. There's Asar Mamoris, Seres Hadibris. Commandments would be Asar Tzivuyim, Asar Mitzvahs. Commandments. The 5th commandment, we know, the 5 commandments were one on luach. There were 2 luchis, 2 tablets, each with 5 commandments on each tablet. Square tablets, as it's obvious from the Gemara, which says that the Aron, Echeles, that the luchis, which means there was no empty space, so it wouldn't have been round, it would have been squarish. Why the 2 tablets? Because the first tablet has been Odom Lamokim, the mitzvahs between man and God. And the second tablet is the mitzvahs between God, man and man. Binodam l'chaber. Here comes the question. The first 4 commandments is clear. I am your God, do not have a false God, do not use God's name in vain, Shabbos. The other 5 commandments are also clear. Not to steal, not to murder, and the other Binodam l'chaber that we talk about there. What this 5th commandment, honoring your parents, seems to be out of place. It belongs on the second tablet. Because it's between man and man. You're honoring your parents. It's not a mitzvah between man and God, seemingly. And obviously, it's not because you simply can't put 6 on one and 4 on the other tablet. That's why it was done. It belongs in the first tablet. There's a reason. Because it is ultimately a mitzvah benodin l'mokim. And there's another question that's asked that answers this question. Chassidus asks the question, we know that in Jewish law, it's forbidden to believe in anything but one God. So there's a concept, okay, one God and not an idol, not another God, not many gods. Then there's a concept that's called shittuf. Shittuf means a partnership. What about God and some partners? God created partners, whether it's stars in heaven or other type of entities that partner with Him in creating. So shittuf is also considered a prohibition to the extent that it's a great desire for a Jew to believe in shittuf. There's a question about shittuf for non-Jew and so on, but that's not relevant to our discussion. Comes the question that's asked in my modern Chassidus, why is Kibud Avayim seems like a shittuf? The Gemara says Gimel Shutfim, there are 3 partners. The man, the father, gives a certain part to the child of the body. The woman gives the mother another part, and the neshama, the soul, comes from God. So what is this honoring parents? It's true, they contribute, but there's only one God. Why is this not a form of shittuf? And the answer is because it's not parents that give life, it's God that gives life. It's only traveling through the parents. And that's why it's really a mitzvah benodin l'mokim. God is saying, I give life through my shluchim, through my messengers, which are your parents. You honor the life I give you through them. You're honoring them, you honor me through honoring them. That's why it's a mitzvah benodin l'mokim. not a mitzvah not l'chaver. It may have also an element that it's doing something kind because your parents were kind to you. But that's not the mitzvah, not because they were your nurturers, not because they protected you and they provided for you. It's because they gave life from God's life, divine life, came to you through them. Which also explains the halacha, basic halacha, that if your parents tell you to do something, God forbid, that is opposite of Torah, you're not supposed to listen. Why? Because they don't have any ownership over you. They have to listen to God, and God's laws precede your respect for your parents. And this also explains the respect word. Love of your parents could be important, but not necessarily a mitzvah. If your parents earned the right, and they also were good parents, healthy parents, parents that nurture, then they deserve more than kavod. But at minimum, you're not honoring them, you're honoring the life that you were given through them. Therefore, even a parent that's abusive deserves that. Not as a parent, the life. Because if you dishonor the life that you were given, you're actually dishonoring yourself. Which is an interesting psychological casualty of many children who grew up in abusive homes. They blame themselves. They see themselves as damaged goods. They see themselves as a problem. And so on. They loathe themselves. So the key here is, if a parent absolutely is abusive and dysfunctional, you honor them because you're honoring the life you were given through them. Why God shows parents like that is a mysterious thing. And that also explains L'man Yerichim Yamecha. Why is it important here? Because that's the point. If you don't value the life you're given, you don't have a long life. If you value the life that was given to you, that's L'man Yerichim Yamecha. You're valuing life, and therefore, as a direct result of it, it adds life to you because you're respecting the life that you were given. This is, of course, a circumstance in the worst scenario where a parent doesn't deserve it on their own. But at minimum, they deserve it because of the life that came through them. How do you express such respect? You know something? If parents are dangerous, pikuach nefesh, psychologically or emotionally, doesn't mean you necessarily have to engage with them. You can respect your parent by going into your own private chamber and saying a kapitel tillim for your parent. But praying for them, praying for their souls, praying for them to one day do tshuva. But never to dishonor the life that was given to you. So it belongs in the first set of the first 5 commandments because it's between you and God. The parents, if they earn their right because they also participated in actually bringing you up in a healthy way, then obviously there's more than just kavod. There's a famous story in the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva, his mother at older age became senile. She would walk outside at times with her feet, bare feet, on glass, on stones, and he would bend down and he'll put his feet there, his hands under her feet, that she shouldn't get hurt. He could have said, she's senile, I'll put her in a nursing home, I'll send the mashliach, I'll send my messengers, I'll send my students. No, because kibbud av v'ein has nothing to do with whether you see a direct benefit. That parent. Now, in this case, Rabbi Akiva's mother, I assume, no question, gave him plenty of good things, even though Rabbi Akiva had a challenging life. But regardless, not to respect, even though you could say kind of all excuses, is not respecting life itself. If the parent also earned the way, then obviously not just honor and respect, it's also love and so on and so forth. So the bottom line is, yes, we can honor and we should honor even those that don't deserve honor, in the sense you're not honoring them per se, you're honoring the life that came through them. And if they earned it, you're also honoring them as well because they were the right channels, they did provide. In addition, it's hard to find parents that are completely dysfunctional. You always find some benefits. But it's important to mention, especially in our day and age, because there are people who literally cannot be in the presence of their parents. Their parents are extremely destructive and dangerous. And from a halachic, Torah point of view, there's nowhere does it say that because your parent says, honor me by coming on your hands and knees, even though I hurt you, it doesn't say such a thing. It says, kabbalah sabicha v'semach, but it doesn't say how that kabbalah should be. Sometimes, if an objective party and a rav say, better not to spend time with his parent because they are very dangerous and destructive to you, it's no different than anything else. A dangerous force is a dangerous force. So kavod is not on the terms of the parents, it's on terms of what the Torah says. The Torah says you honor the life. Now, the parents, as I said, earned it. Obviously, there's much more than just that minimal honor. Much more to say on this topic, but that's a critical component of approaching not just honoring parents, but many other things that are similar vein, that when you have someone that may have hurt you, we discussed this in previous episodes, that you have to distinguish between the hurt and the person who's hurt you. Har b'drachim l'makim, and you have to remember that ala nizek, the person who's hurt you, deserves to be accountable. But the fact that it happened to you sometimes deserves actually a thank you. Ligmal l'chayovim tevis, we talked about Joseph and his brothers, that Joseph actually repaid them with kindness, because he realized it was God's hand. So that means he honored in a way that which came to him, even though the person himself doesn't deserve it. Because you're not talking about the person, you're talking about the channel that they served as bringing godliness or a blessing to you, even sometimes through negative ways. Again, this does not forgive, nor does in any way minimize and compromise the accountability that parents have to have for children, and especially if they hurt their children, God forbid, as I discussed before. I want to just share, I remember when I was doing a radio show, it was on this topic, how to honor parents that don't seem to deserve honor. And it was a live show, calls came in. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Everybody was calling in with all these nightmare stories about their parents. I felt so uncomfortable at some point. I felt like, is there anyone out there, I said, that loves their parents? I felt like I was attracting only people who hate their parents. Or maybe everyone hates their parents. So finally someone calls. This was very funny. And I take the call. It says, yes, I do not hate my parents. I was not abused by my parents, but I hate my children because I'm being abused by my children. So some relief. Anyway, as funny as it is, obviously it's really a tragedy. It's another topic about children's obligations to parents not to hurt them, which obviously fits into all of this. But I'm discussing now the other way around, the abusive side. So, as I said, this is a topic which deserves a lot more discussion, but we'll get to it another time. Going back to the issue of hitting our children, the questions that I had, which I've already answered, but I wanted to read the questions. I'm reading the questions after the answer. But since I have it here, let me say, my children are Canaan Hara, bright and active. We live in a far-flung city on Shlichus with no local day school. There are times when I feel the need to hit my children. They hit me and my spouse when they're upset about something. They even sometimes wave a knife at us. Please give your advice. Age range, 8 to 3. Oh boy. Many times I hit my children, another question. Many times they hit myself and or my spouse. Also many times I need to drag them by the hand if they don't cooperate. Please give some guidance. Finally, what is the best approach for disciplining our children? Are there times when it is acceptable to give them a good thwack? Right now my approach is that I smack whenever they put themselves or someone else's life in danger. So I answered the question about hitting, that basically it's unacceptable, period. And there are many ways to discipline. And most importantly, not to do it out of uncontrollable anger because you have no other way, or that's what you think is the only option. These are sacred children. And children by nature are not violent. Children by nature learn that from their parents. So when you talk about a child that hits back, you wonder, where did that child learn to do that? Especially age 8 to 3, it's hard to imagine. Waving a knife. I would say whoever's writing some of these questions, especially the one with a knife, needs professional help. And you must talk to someone that's professional. I don't know all the circumstances, but if such conditions are taking place in a person's home, there's a real problem. Someone here. I usually begin with the adults, but maybe the children, I'm not sure what's going on here. But anything of this nature where you have parents hitting children and children hitting parents, there's some serious dysfunctionality going on. It's out of control, and probably don't even have a control over any of their emotions, let alone thinking that these are sacred children and God's children. So anyone out there that's in any situation where things seem to be out of control, go get professional help immediately. I'm discussing terms where a person is aware at least that hitting or being angry or in any other way abusive is unhealthy. If it's a situation where it's just happening regularly and it's going all around, father, mother, children, you must have professional help. And this goes to both questions, the second one as well who asked that question. As far as giving a good thwack, in general, as I said from the Rebbe's approach, best al-tigu b'mishichai is a hebel she'ein beichet, teneku shel beis rabbam, better not to touch. There are many ways you could discipline. If you think about it, be creative, talk to somebody. It should be premeditated, it should be deliberate, it should be thought through, it shouldn't be based on, if someone did something, here's a thwack. In a case where you put someone else's life in danger, that too, right away rings to me. If someone in your home is putting someone else in danger, I don't know if a slap is going to solve the solution. He's going to solve the problem. He's going to offer a solution. You need to figure out what's going on here. And again, questions that come in these anonymous forums without understanding context, the family structure, what's really going on, very difficult to address. Yet I read them because people did ask them, so I want to give some consideration to that. But most importantly, you need to have professional help, and I reiterate that again and again. Let's move on to another subject. This subject is the subject of loneliness. How can older singles deal with loneliness? And let me read the question or two that people have written in. Question: what can you tell older singles who, after running around all day looking after everyone else, come home to empty homes and bedrooms? Being as active as we possibly can is one thing, and many of us are, but we still come home alone, often to fall into addiction and depression, and if not, definitely profound existential crisis. I read the script when you went on radio with Leonard Cohen about loneliness. Can you elaborate on that specifically in relation to singles? Can you also elaborate on the relationship that we as singles have or are meant to have with Hashem and the specific beauty, meaningfulness, mission in that relationship which is separate to what married couples have? It's a sensitive topic and one that's not easy to address, especially in sweeping terms, because it's very case by case. First of all, let me begin with some empathy. My heart goes out to anyone who's in a situation where they're of age, should have been married a while ago, and they don't feel they're able to get married, or that whatever the difficulties are, or their circumstances, or God's plan. Because the Torah says it's not good for a human being to be alone. We were created male and female. God created us in the divine image, and we complement each other. As much as we are individual identities, there's something, ein adam b'lo yisha. A person is not complete without a spouse. It doesn't say that about a woman. Some say because a woman is more complete without a spouse than a man. That's another discussion. But regardless, you can pretty much say it's across the board, man to woman, woman to man, that people need each other. Not just for intimacy and for having children, but simply companionship. And all that comes with the beauty of a relationship of two people who can share their lives together, build their lives together, complement each other, and all that comes with companionship and conversation and stimulation, etc., etc. Not to mention love, romance, and the intimacy that good, healthy, sacred relationship brings. So obviously, we can't just say, "Hey, it's great, and I'll just bless you and be a good, healthy, lonely person." A Lonely Hearts Club is not an easy club to be part of. So the question here, however, is not being asked, what can I do to get married? Which I think is an important question. That should be the question being asked. Not that I can tell someone who's asking the question what they should be asking. But that really is the goal. Because at the end of the day, to say that you're going to replace companion with some type of activity or some type of distraction is simply not the case. And again, I'm not speaking for anyone who has, for whatever reason, not got married in their lifetime. I'm not suggesting their life can't be happy and productive. It happens. It happens. But anything we can do in our power has to be toward that goal of finding your soulmate. And no matter what age you are. When people ask the question, are some people destined not to have a soulmate? Even if you find that maybe God in His mysterious plan has such a plan for someone, how do you know it's you? Well, based on what? Based on your own subjective instincts. Based on it's difficult. Difficult. Kashik Kriyas Yamsuf. It's as difficult as parting the sea. Rebbe once told somebody who went by dollars that he wants a blessing in Kashik Kriyas, the thing that's Kashik Kriyas Yamsuf, that's difficult as parting the sea. So the Rebbe said Kriyas Yamsuf, which means only like parting the sea. It's not as quite as difficult, a little less, but it's still difficult. So to make a statement that some of us are not destined is a dangerous place to go, and it's not up to us to make that decision. After the fact, the person lived their life and they for some reason God did not allow, or they even messed it up. It's another story after the fact. Before the fact, you have to do everything possible to find that type of companion. And if it didn't work, change friends, change location, Mishana Mokim, Mishana Mazel, change attitude. Remember, if you don't change something, nothing changes. You have to change something on your end, and that will lead to other. As I said, that was not the question asked to me. The question was dealing with the loneliness. So now I want to address that. So number one, the issue of B'tachon. B'tachon means trust in God. We are lonely people, not just because we don't have other people, because you can be also in a marriage with friendship and still feel lonely. Talk about Leonard Cohen. I think Leonard Cohen sings, "Let's be lonely together." There are people who are lonely together. Probably easier than being lonely alone. But the point I'm making here is that loneliness is something that is part of the human condition, an existential loneliness. And the way to resolve that, to fill that, is to dedicate your life to something that is divine, your mission. Remember, everyone has a mission in life. Even a single person who's not yet married, who should be married or is of age already, still has a mission in life. To say your life is a waste, God forbid, because you haven't found your soulmate, you may feel miserable, you may feel alone at home. But to say you have no mission is ridiculous. Because none of us get married at birth. First, we begin by developing our own souls and finding our mission. Then hopefully we find our soulmate who also has a mission, and these missions come together. So the critical thing is important to know that every human being is valuable. And even though sometimes you may feel very alone, you're God's child, you're God's gift, and God has blessed you with a life and particular skills, and find what your passion is. But I want to qualify. This doesn't replace the search for a soulmate. Now, there was a guy in the Upper West Side, a rabbi, a number of years ago, said that I have a solution to the dilemma of single life, the epidemic of single life, the mecca of singles in New York City. What's the solution? We should forbid all singles events. No more have these dinners and these parties. Let singles stay home and be miserable, and you'll see the marriage rate will go up. There was such outrage from that. But in a way, you think about it, there's a point, because sometimes you get so busy and so filling your life to get rid of that type of loneliness, that itself becomes an end in itself. Now, I'm not suggesting that in any way, because I just said every person has a mission. I'm just suggesting not to overdo it, where you become so self-contained, you don't need anybody else. So it's a balancing act, to realize you have an absolute mission, find some passion. And not just making money, we're not talking about something materialistic. Something spiritual, helping others, is always a guaranteed solution to some loneliness. Is it a complete solution? No. I cannot tell you that that's going to solve the question that you come home alone, into your bedroom alone, into your home alone. That's why I'm mentioning and emphasizing the need to also continue to seek and not give up hope and not be resigned. There's always hope. There's no such thing. There's no hope. Rabbi Akiva, who I mentioned earlier, at age 40, just began his spiritual journey. Maybe he didn't begin the spiritual journey at age 40, but he began to become a Torah scholar at age 40. Till then, he didn't know anything. Famous story. He saw the drops of water, persistence. So never give up hope. And above all, while you're right now where you are, you have to do whatever it takes to fill your life with something meaningful. Now, is it difficult? Yes. But what you have to do is find yourself people who have that upbeat attitude. One of the things I see is many people who are lonely singles choose other lonely singles to be friends with. So it's very nice and compassionate, but usually misery loves company, and it doesn't help the situation. A young woman got engaged at age 35, tells me, from Manhattan, she says that she is being now, literally, she feels like a pariah, rejected by her friends, the singles, because they feel that she betrayed them by getting married. She betrayed the Lonely Hearts Club. Instead of, I'm telling her, if they're real friends, they should be celebrating for you. And seeing your simcha, your joy, as a contagious thing that hopefully will rub off and bring them some joy. And ultimately find their soul. Instead, they're rejecting you. Why? Because you expose that being alone is not the best thing in life. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. Torah doesn't mince words. It's not good to be alone. And we find some solace, and we find some comfort in love and knowing someone cares about you, someone's waiting for you to come home, someone's worried when you're not there, etc. So let's not sanctify and deify single life. It has its beauties, it has its time, but then there's a time where you need to have that commitment. But that doesn't mean that living single is meant to be a destiny of doom either. You have to find what you have to find in your mission. At the same time, find the balance to not allow that mission to overwhelm your needs. Some people get so busy, they have no time to date. I'm too busy. That definitely is not going to lead you to find your soulmate. Now, again, this is not necessarily something that is a final, full solution. I just wanted to share some words. I did not find from the Rebbe a direct answer to this, but I believe this is in the spirit of many letters and many approaches the Rebbe took to similar situations, where you have to find both sides to it. That even though the situation is not yet the best situation, that doesn't mean that you have to wallow in your own misery or loneliness. You could find meaning in your life. At the end of the day, as I mentioned, Eicha Yoshva Badot, as that talk that this writer refers to, the script that on the radio that I spoke about Leonard Cohen and loneliness. At the end of the day, Yirmiyahu bemoans the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, not the destruction of the temple. He doesn't begin with that. He doesn't begin with the deaths, so many people that died. He doesn't begin with the exile. He begins, Eicha Yashva Badot. Whoa, she sits alone. Yerushalayim sits alone. Because loneliness sometimes is worse than every problem. A problem can be a problem, but when there's other people there with you, fighting with you, you have some strength. When you're alone, the loneliness demoralizes you even more than the initial problem. So loneliness is no blessing, and I'm not suggesting it is. But at the same time, you also find in Sichos and Maimorim, there's a beautiful Maimorim that talk about Bodod. There's also Bodod, the Yisrael are unique in that they're Bodod, Lishkin, that they rest and they reside alone. They're unique. Am Levadad Yishkin is the expression. Both in Parsha Bracha, you find this. You also find in the Brachas of Bilam that he didn't sit alone. What does alone here mean? Not loneliness in a negative sense, but loneliness in a positive sense. They're unique. So there's an element of uniqueness that also lies in someone being alone, because even when you're with the people that love you and you're close to them, there's always a part of us that remains apart, remains alone. Is that a sad thing? It could be sad. But on the other hand, it could be a responsibility. Hillel said it best. If I'm not for me, who will be for me? That's a lonely place, because you have to take care of yourself. If I'm only for myself, what am I? We need others. Which is part of the basis of what I just said, that on one hand, yes, you need to know that in your life, you can take care of your life. You don't have to be some pathetic case. You have a mission, no matter who you are. But then, only for myself, what am I? Bittul is not just to become arrogant in our own self-contained state, but to have bittul and humility to realize, yes, we need another to help us get and transcend to greater places. I welcome any more questions that you have on this topic. By no means is this exhaustive. I just wanted to share a few words on this sensitive and painful topic that many don't refuse to address or avoid, etc. Let's go to another question. So now this is money and Judaism. Making ends meet as a Torah Jew. So here's some questions that came in. This is just a sampling of some of the questions. Could you address the work-Torah balance issue? Going beyond the basics, how rich should we strive to be? Are the people who take government programs when they don't really qualify doing something wrong? With so many kids and expenses, it seems like people have to fudge the law a bit. Someone told me that in Golas, this is what we have to do. Is it wrong? Should those people be on a different path? Another questioner asks, I was taught that we should not put all our efforts into making money, but rather on learning Torah. However, if I don't put that extra effort in, I fall short each month. What is the appropriate balance? Next question. Same topic. What is the right way to approach welfare and government programs? There seems to be a sense of entitlement surrounding it and common practice of people lying in order to qualify. Is this acceptable practice for Torah Jews? Another question. Tuition is so high for yeshivas. At this point, it seems I need to either consider going on birth control in order to provide my children with this luxury, or be open to the possibility of sending my children to public school. And finally, one more question in this family. It really bugs me when I hear about people fighting for tuition cuts while they go on family vacations each year and always wearing designer clothing because they work over the books and collect benefits from the government. I work 3 jobs to pay tuition and make ends meet. Sometimes I feel like I should just stop working and go on the dole. I'd be better off and a lot less resentful. Do you have any advice? Okay. So all great questions, relevant questions, on a topic which we all have to deal with. So let's begin with the role, let's start from the beginning, the Torah view on Parnas. We know that Seder Ksusa Inosa is a mitzvah for a husband to provide food and clothing, and intimacy, but food and clothing, which requires that he go out and work. Because people are not necessarily going to give you gifts. So the working parent, the working adult, is responsible to family. Parnasa. Now, what does parnasa mean? How much? You can immerse yourself so much, forget about your family. So clearly you have to know what the ends are, what the means. The means of parnasa is in order to support a family, to bring up a healthy family in a home. But never think it's an end in itself. The famous story with the Rebbe Rashab, who saw one of his Talmidim, one of the twins, and came to him years later, and he saw that he was so immersed in his business. The business was what? Galoshes. He was a galoshes manufacturer. In those days in the shtetl, that streets were unpaved, you could imagine that galoshes saved many shoes. So he made a lot of money. The Rebbe Rashab saw how immersed he was in his galoshes business, and he said to him, Ich habe gesehen a Fies in Galoshen, aber a Kopf in Galoshen habe ich kein Leben. I've seen a feet in galoshes, but I've never seen a head in galoshes. Which means he saw his head completely immersed, completely submerged in the galoshes, completely distracted. The Rebbe speaks about the loy lev. Do something without your heart and with your heart. So obviously, Masa Matna B'Amunah, a person has to work in a faithful way, an ethical way, and we cannot be saying, cannot be distracted from his work in order that, because it may compromise his output and his efficiency and his obligation as a worker. On the other hand, work is a means. It's a famous story with Chassidus Applied, who was a businessman. And it's a famous story that he was making the calculations, accounting, and he was accounting for the year, the income, expenses, came to the sum total. He wrote, Eined Milvad, there's nothing but God. On each line, however, he did write out the calculations. So the question is asked, the Rebbe asked the question, what is this? If he's so consumed with God, then every line he should have written, Tishrei, God, Eined Milvad, Cheshvan, Eined Milvad. And every line he wrote the right figure. It was only the sum total that he wrote Eined Milvad. So, which one is it? If you had the presence of mind to calculate it, you should have a calculation at the end as well. Either or. The Rebbe's response, explanation, a number of times was no. If he had written God on each line, it shouldn't be a business. Because business has to be done ethically. He has to have ethical business. He has to be accountable. But it comes to sum total. What's the total of it all? It's not the money. It's Eined Milvad, it's God. Now this balance is not easy to maintain. That's why you find so many Chassidim who bemoan the challenge to the Alter Rebbe, to the other Rabbeim. How do I, Mayim Rabbim, the torrential rainwaters of Daigas HaParnasa, the concerns of Parnasa as he interprets it in Torah and Noach. How do I not allow that to overwhelm me? Lo yuchel lichvis ha'sa'ab. And all the different solutions of how not to allow Daigas HaParnasa to consume us. This is a fundamental Chassidus, because we're sent to this earth to make a parnasa, but never to think it's an end in itself. So there's all the different eitzes. There's B'Shavsa Hashem, or Shavsa Haaretz Shabbos LaHashem, in Parashat Bahar, where we read that right away you have to know that the whole purpose of the work is Shabbos. The work is meant to be, the purpose is to bring Shabbos into the world. Just like it's a mitzvah for Shabbos, it's a mitzvah also, Sheish Yom Taseh Malach 6 days you shall work. The Sifri says that's also an obligation. There's also keeping in mind that even when you're working at the Kavanah, it's the purpose of God wanting to transform this world. Many different eitzes. But the bottom line, they all come to teach us balance. That work is necessary. Making money is a blessing. In Judaism, poverty is not a blessing. Ashirus is a bracha, is a blessing. But never to the point where it totally overwhelms and destroys or doesn't allow you to be with your family and to do the priorities of learning Torah and so on. So you have different halachas that talk about kfiyas Torah, the learning of Torah, the mitzvahs, davening. All these things have their time, and you're obligated to follow. Some people pay the kachet shachrit, pay the kachet arvis, because if they're working, they're zvulim. Their role primarily is working. They too need limud Torah, one chapter in the morning, one in the night. Others have more time for it. That already is a question you have to ask Rav. Each person according to his situation. But completely not Torah, God forbid. It's balance, and the balance is critical. Now, what about the situation we live in the world where you see it's hard to make ends meet? Both parents have to work hard. And how do you get by without doing some things that fudge the law? Well, let's start with the law. The law, din machusa din is law. The fact that people find Meir Heter and find themselves at in the loopholes, people do a lot of things based on their own whims and their own interests. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the Torah, sanctioned by the Torah or condoned by the Torah. If you're a Torah Yid, there's a thing called being ethical. Being ethical to Jews, being ethical to non-Jews, being ethical to the government as well. I don't think we need MyLife, Chassidus Applied, to discuss halachas of ethics and halachas of accountability and responsibility. And if you have difficulties, remember, the parnasa comes from heaven, doesn't come from earth. We make a keli. But there are people who work hard. As much as they work, the money doesn't come as much as they like. And there are others who work a little less and it does come. So you need to have birchas Hashem b'tashit. The blessing of God makes you wealthy. On the other hand, God blesses us in our actions. And this comes down to balance. You have to do what it takes. We have a mashpia, a rav that can help you determine are you doing what it takes, not doing enough, or doing too much. As I said, this is case by case. There's some people who determined, like I told the story about the Baal Shem Tov, by him, was, he needed something, he went and clapped in love, he clapped in the window of someone and went away. That was the effort. By him, that was an effort. By most of us, to go away, after you knock on the window, you should wait there to get the help you need. So the effort must be done. God's blessing is ultimately what blesses us. And this is a balance that needs to be determined case by case. That the need to rely on cheating or some type of theft, whether it's from an individual or government. It's true, most people are more lax with the government because it's not personal. But when you're lax, and there are people also lax with other people. Let's be honest about it. Talking about honesty. The fact of the matter is God blesses, and we do not have to resort to other methods. The fact is that we're insecure people, we're materialistic people, we can become greedy, and therefore we turn to other methods. So I'm not going to use this platform in any way to condone or any way to allow anyone to think that Torah has its standards. The standards are the highest standards. It says Rav Chia would go into a butcher shop, and he would not take meat on credit because on his level, it would be considered Achil Hashem. People would think he's taking meat without paying. So everyone on their level has to know what's Achil Hashem, but there are definitely things that are not permissible. Now, how do we deal with this challenge? How do we deal with the challenge? Well, like all challenges. I know an individual came to me. His wife first came to me, she called me, and her husband refuses to go to work. Instead, he goes to learn. He does a lot of mitzvahs and tzedakahs and so on. Who gave him that right to do that when the family is suffering? Besides the mere fact that he has a responsibility to support his family, there's also respect. What kind of respect can a wife have to a husband, or children to a father who's not going to work? All the good excuses. And we know that people in this Zman HaShas were careful not to make parnasa from their kedusha. They had other jobs, menial jobs, in order for them to allow them time to study and so on. So you have to have an objective mashpia that looks at your situation and will be tough with you, tough love in a kind way, that will tell you this is right, what you're doing, this is not right. I think if we go with that approach, with some bittul, we'll have answers to most of these questions. Now, the question about chinuch and so on is something I'd like to discuss, but I'll leave that for another episode, because it comes down to a whole discussion. Chinuch is very expensive. This I have to address now the schools, the way they're charging for the tuition, and the standards they're creating may have been different in the past. But I want to just sum up regarding this whole issue of money and Judaism making ends meet. At the end of the day, Judaism and Yiddishkeit and Chassidus particularly is built on a partnership between us and God. You do your part, and God does his part. Nemet Chsufa, which means bread of shame, is when you get gifts and you don't work at it. Now someone will say, why do I have to work? Someone's giving me a gift. I have a rich father-in-law. I have a family that has left me wealth, whatever it may be. Work is an Adam only evolved. The person was created to do work. There's three types of work: amal malacha, amal sicha, amal teira. Actual labor, prayer, sicha, or teira. But amal malacha is part of the picture. And producing and creating is part of the human condition, a gift God gave us. Tav Shalamet Beis. The Rebbe turned 70 years old. You can look it up, it's amazing. So the Rebbe writes, says in the Farbrengen, you know this and that year. He's receiving letters that he's achieved so much, now it's time to slow down or even retire. And the Rebbe said in the famous statement that your age is not based on your passport, it's based on your attitude. But above all, we are created to work. We're created to produce. So what does it mean a person is suddenly going to come of age and decide, no more to produce, I'm ready to just hang out. As long as you're given strength, you have to continue producing. And the Rebbe then, in that talk and in the letter of Pesach that year, the Rebbe said some major chiddush. He explained, you see, when a person doesn't work, and he has nema de chsufa, it's bread of shame, he's ashamed. A person has more pleasure in $1 or one measure that he makes on his own, he earns on his own, than 9 from someone else. So with $9 you can buy more than with $1. But the echus, the quality, the pressure, the pleasure, and the appreciation will be far more from the $1. $9 you'll blow quicker if someone gives it to you as a gift. With the $1 you earned. So the Rebbe asked the question, how good for Kash? Since God is Teva hated, God is such an ultimate good, why didn't He allow creating creation and existence where you can have pleasure from getting a gift and not working hard? And it shouldn't be bread of shame. Receiving without feeling any shame. The Rebbe's answer is both simple and brilliant. The Rebbe's answer is because God wanted to create a human being in His image as a shutuf, to be a creator like God is a creator. And therefore the pleasure, it's not just because of pleasure, it's built in. That when a person creates, he has the deepest pleasure because God wants us to be mashpiyim, not just takers, but givers. So when a person works, that's considered a sacred thing. That itself is part of that faith. Yes, is it like learning Torah, Amul Torah? Good, Amul Torah may be a higher level. But as I said before, Shabbos is only one day in the 7-day week. 6 days, wouldn't it be nice if we had 6-day Shabbos and one day weekday? But it's not that way. 6 days, the kavanah of transforming the world. Work. And one day Shabbos, Kol Malach V'Chasuya, you're not allowed to work. Why? Because you don't need to work. Because that's a day of soul. But just like it's a mitzvah to keep Shabbos, it's a mitzvah to work. Why am I emphasizing it? Because I don't want to give anyone the impression that work is just some type of necessary evil. It's part of the kavanah, and it's part of our dignity and honor to achieve something. And does it mean abundance? No, like I said before, the story, and I stand corrected, it wasn't Chassidus Applied, it was Binyamin Kletzker. The story with Einay Milvadi, you have to know what the bottom line is. The bottom line is that there's a higher purpose. Never forget that the parnos is for your family, not your family is for your parnos. We live not to work, we work to live, not live to work. So with that said, the bad idea of earning a living in an ethical way is the Torah way. We make the keli, and God then, B'chas Hashem, Yitashin, God's blessing makes us wealthy. How much to immerse? I discussed this case by case. Obviously, you have to do the derech hateva what's required. You can't just bang at the window and go to sleep. You have to work hard, and you guide them with tzasi. Through effort, you find, you acquire, you discover what you need to discover. And there needs to be a balance. Now, life today is challenging. Yes, there are many expenses. But attitude is a major force, and there should never be a moment of a cause for strife between husband and wife. If there's financial challenges, let them work together. And again, try to find an objective party that can help determine, are you doing everything you should be doing? Are you doing too much? Are you doing too little? Directing and guiding. As I said, tuition I will address in a different talk. Now, as far as, yes, people fighting about tuition and then making priority choices of how they dress, I'm not here to tell people how to spend their money. Everybody has to spend as they see fit. We have a Torah for this, we have halachas, and we have different preferences. Some things are acceptable. Obviously, it's all about balance. As I said before, it's all about balance. Now, the fact of the matter is the government does offer us many different programs. So there people say, hey, you know what, if I can get benefit from these programs, I can work over the books or do other things. Obviously, there's the legalities of the matter, which I addressed earlier. That's not for anyone to make a decision to do something illegal. Ask it off if you have a shayla. Many people obviously don't want to hear about this. They'd rather not hear the topic addressed, and they can continue doing what they're doing. I'm not here to judge anyone, and I'm not here to tell anyone what to do. I'm just saying, address it in a comprehensive way. Because remember, if you start cutting corners on one thing, usually it cuts corners in other areas. And what kind of dignity does it create where you feel that your life is based on all programs and welfare and other things like that? Those that really need it, really need it. But those that don't have to be careful just not to become narcissists and just feed off the fat of the land because you could. Your children learn from that, and long term it may not be worth it. There's a couple who got Section 8, welfare, Medicaid, and so on. They were able to do it because he was barely making a living. And interestingly, after a few years of their marriage, pressure started to build. And when I spoke to them, I remember consulting when they came to consult me, I saw that he was getting demoralized by the fact that he's not really working on it. Instead, he's always figuring out the next program. And that was keeping him down. Today, thank God, he's blessed as a wealthy person. I told him, you got to get off the programs. You become addicted to them. Once you become addicted to taking from others, even though you may think, hey, wow, that's great. I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is take from others. What it does to the spirit is not healthy. You don't think big. You don't think that you can accomplish things. You get used to lech ben hashemayim. It has to undermine a person's confidence. Whereas if you say, you know what, I'm not going to be dependent on this one or that one, I'm going to make it on my own, with God's blessing, obviously, it changes a person's attitude. And unfortunately, today, the media, the religious Jews are getting a bad rap for the highest level of poverty, having a lot of children, which is a blessing from God, but not working. With the Torah, they're learning Torah, they're holy, and so on. Those few that learn Torah and are supported by others because they're learning one thing. The majority are not, and I would simply say that we have an achrayus here. A godly person does what God wants, not what you want. And dressing up poverty or not working hard in the levushim, garments of kedusha, Yerushalayim, is not necessarily godly. Definitely not Chassidus. Chassidus talks is practical. It talks about bringing responsibility and doing what you have to do, including parnasa and livelihood, financially, and so on. And it's about an attitude. So I wanted to address that attitude, which unfortunately is perpetuated, and people tend to reinforce it with each other. And it's not necessarily the attitude of the Rebbe, which is the attitude of proactive, go change the world in some way. Look, shluchim. They're involved in a very psychiatric. They need funds from others, tzedakah, to survive. But some of them have become great leaders, great mashpiyim. Just because it's being sponsored in a non-profit fashion doesn't mean they're not producing great things. So you can be in a receiving end and not doing much. You can be in a receiving you can be on the receiving end and achieving great things. Just like people invest in a business for profit and they receive return, you can invest in non-profit and receive great return. More can be said on this topic as well. Suffice for now. I will conclude with one letter that came to me that was addressing, as I've read letters from previous episodes, where I discussed how to deal with difficult challenges. You can have a choice to view it in a positive way, and the same thing in reverse, to review it in a negative way. So a fellow wrote to me that here's a beautiful letter from the Rebbe, contrasting Adam Adishin and the people during the Holocaust. It's a beautiful letter dated the first of Kislev, Tavshin Chaf Aleph, which would be 1960. It's printed in Migros Kodesh of the Rebbe's volume 20, page 41. It's in Hebrew, but I'll translate it into English. So the Rebbe writes to someone, it looks like a woman, I received your letter, and I will, at the Tzion, Friedrich Rebbe's gravesite, I will mention things you asked me. Then the Rebbe continues, he says, despite the tone of your writing and the content, and moreover, though your situation keeps changing in almost every letter that I receive from you, I, the Rebbe writes, have not lost my hope that that ultimately, not only will you see the good in life, also the good, which includes the good in your own life, but this seeing the goodness in life will also bring you a feeling in your heart, and especially according to the Signon of Teres Chassidus, in the language of Chassidus, that in our world everything is a combination, is a conglomerate, a hybrid of good and evil. Tevarah. Hakol ma'urav tevarah. And it's a person is on him is the responsibility to choose what he's going to emphasize and what he's going to contemplate. In other words, everything has good and everything has negative. Everything has positive, everything has negative. It's the person that decides. And in what he will interest himself. Because in the life of every person there are two paths. To see the good that surrounds him, or, the Rebbe just says, etc. And if this is the case with all people, how much more so with Bnei Yisrael, with sons and daughters in Israel, who believe with absolute faith in the Nitzchis HaNefesh, in the eternity of the soul, which means the eternity of the spiritual, which means the Netzachin HaTev and Netzachin HaHechel, that good will always ultimately and absolutely prevail. Basically, it's impossible that something will not ultimately prevail that is nitzchi. If something is eternal, it has to ultimately emerge. Compared to something that's temporary and fleeting. And then the Rebbe, this is a very powerful paragraph, he says. And then we learn from a sipur from Chazal that Adam Arish, even before he was expelled from the Garden of Eden, he's saying he complained about his situation. And he was called Kafei Teva, someone who did not appreciate what was the good that was done to him. And by contrast, now you find Bnei Yisrael, you find Jews, men and women, that were b'machlis ha'hezger shel Ashkenazim yimach shemam, that were in the concentration camps by the Germans. God should erase their name should be erased. And in the worst possible situation, they blessed Birchas HaShachar. They said thank you in the morning to Hashem. They acknowledged and thanked the creator of the world, the one who runs the world. And at the end of the day, the Rebbe says, everyone's in these two extremes. Adam Arish, before he's even expelled from Gan Eden, complaining, and you have people in the worst possible situation thanking God. Everybody is somewhere in between. So therefore we have the choice. Then the Rebbe concludes, moving V'gam Pashman, it's self-understood, that this is not any type of justification for any person, or befrat someone who suffered, only to emphasize the mitzias. And the bottom line, that the way a person and their lifestyle and their quality of life, if their life will be filled with satisfaction, contentment, and meaning, or the opposite, is all dependent in a major measure, a tremendous measure, the Ratzon Adam, in a person's will, which controls with the Rias Ein Sichle. It controls how he looks at things with his mind, to look at the right side or to look at the left side. The Rebbe once told somebody, Rabbi Yunik, one of the secretaries, that thank God that I trained myself long ago to look at everything with the right eye. Because if not, both the Chiddush can't taste help. Because if not, I would not have been able to contain it, been able to take it. So this is a general lesson, both in episodes earlier, obviously almost any topic, attitude, how you set your mind, etc. It's a tremendous force in our lives, no matter what challenge we have. So though it's not addressing the question particularly of this episode, it addresses many questions that I've addressed. This has been Rabbi Simon Jacobson with MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 14. And please send in your questions in our anonymous forum, meaningfullife.com/MyLifeLive. And until next week, Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. Thank you.